On July 10, 1803, beneath Lima's sun and the stained silk of polite society, a domestic discovery detonated. In the Marquise's pale mansion, the servants found 4 women, 1 Marquise and her 3 daughters, each unmistakably with child, each named the same man. The scandal the Crown would later try to erase began exactly here, in whispered seamstress remarks, in a confessor's dry cough, in a carpenter's measured silence. This is not a tale of rumor, but of documents, ledgers, and priestly notebooks pulled from drawers when fear demanded witnesses. The official world knew how to stamp a page and bury an embarrassment. What it did not know was how a single human body could unmoor a family's entire claim to respectability. If this opening grips you, subscribe now and leave a comment saying where you're watching from. Your voice matters in bringing buried truth to light. And if you intend to carry this secret with us, write in the comments the phrase twice to seal this truth within you. I witnessed the buried name. I witnessed the buried name. Señora Elena de Valverde, widow and Marquise, kept her house like a ledger, reputations balanced carefully, alliances recorded in the margins. At 42, she projected an authority that preempted questions. Her daughters, Isabella 25, quick with a laugh, Mariana 22, restless with thought, Lucia 19, soft and watchful, performed the rituals of class. 40 servants and 20 enslaved people moved through rooms the way clockwork moves through gears. Among them worked Mateo, a carpenter purchased from a northern hacienda, remarkable for a skill masters mistrusted he could read. Mateo's literacy bought him edges of space other enslaved men did not inhabit. He measured window frames in daughters' chambers, reinforced shutters, fit shelves in studies where letters waited. Alone with furniture and paper, he crossed thresholds that ordinary servants did not. In the spring of 1803, small disruptions traced patterns: Isabella avoiding morning prayers, Lucia's appetite changing, Señora Elena's rosary fingers trembling. The seamstress noted waist alterations, subtle fabric changes that spoke of more than fashion. At first, people called these things chance. Then coincidences multiplied. We stand at the point where civility begins to fail and consequence takes over. The household's quiet geometry broke, and every person in its orbit would be asked to decide whether to protect a name or to protect a life. Before we move deeper into the rooms where vows unravel and secrets are negotiated, subscribe, tell us where you're watching from, and if you mean to bear witness, type the binding phrase twice in the comments. I witnessed the buried name. I witnessed the buried name. The choice made in that yellow parlor would force silence from clergy, servants, and merchants alike. It would redraw alliances, erase papers, and set a human life adrift. Listen closely. What you hear now alters how you understand power, and never forget it. The morning unfolded with deceptive calm. Sunlight filtered through the high windows of the Valverde mansion, tracing squares on polished tiles, yet the air inside carried a weight that no light could dissolve. The servants moved with habitual precision, fires lit, water heated, breakfast set on polished tables. But the rhythm was hollow, as if each measured motion carried the anticipation of a revelation no one dared speak aloud. In this delicate suspension, Señora Elena's eldest daughter, Isabella, failed to appear at morning prayers. Mariana lingered behind closed shutters, and Lucia's absence left the chapel seats unnervingly vacant. Only the youngest daughter, Lucia, knelt, ghostly pale, fingers digging into the wood of the pew, as if bracing herself against invisible forces. The family's confessor, Father Alonso Rivera, paused mid-chant, his eyes scanning the pews, heart sensing the breach, in order that he had never encountered before. The morning prayers concluded hastily, and Father Alonso approached Lucia, seeking clarity. Her whisper was fragile yet urgent. You must see for yourself, Father. In the Marquise's private chamber quickly. The room he entered, a space of muted blues and carefully arranged furniture, had long been the seat of authority, a place where only the most trusted were permitted. The women awaited him, draped in loose gowns that betrayed the contours of impossible truths. Each of them carried unmistakable evidence of pregnancy, and the priest felt the air constrict around him. The full weight of what had been concealed for months pressed upon him like a stone. Father, Señora Elena began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. What we disclose here must never leave this room. Not a word to anyone. She was the matriarch, yet in that moment, desperation sharpened her command. Isabella, Mariana, and Lucas shared looks that were at once defiant and resigned. They had rehearsed these confessions in silence, one by one, never imagining their lives could unravel so completely in concert. Father Alonso's mind struggled to bridge reason and observation. How could one man, an enslaved carpenter, Mateo, skilled and literate but always constrained by property laws, be implicated in a chain of events so extraordinary that it threatened to obliterate the Valverde family's social standing? The women's narrative was precise, deliberate. Each believed herself alone in circumstance, until confessions converged. Mateo, it was said, had entered chambers under pretense of repair, carrying neither threat nor coercion, yet emerging with consequences that none could reconcile. Before we journey further into this unfolding labyrinth of secrecy, betrayal, and calculated survival, take a moment to subscribe and leave a comment naming your location. In doing so, you help illuminate histories deliberately hidden. The pattern emerging within these walls was no mere domestic misfortune. It was a carefully orchestrated collision of desire, power, and societal constraint, and it would demand choices so severe that every life within the mansion would be indelibly marked. The tension is just beginning. Father Alonso stood in the Marquise's private chamber, the air heavy with unspoken truths. Elena's gaze held him captive, a mixture of authority, desperation, and a flicker of fear that belied her composed exterior. Isabella's lips trembled, yet she managed to meet his eyes with a quiet defiance. Mariana's hands twisted nervously in her lap, while Lucia seemed to shrink inward, her youth magnifying the shock of what had occurred. And there, in the stillness of the blue draped room, Father Alonso realized the impossible: 4 pregnancies, each woman claiming the same father. His training in canon law had prepared him for sin, for indiscretion, for human weakness. But nothing in books or confessions could have prepared him for this convergence of scandal. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until Sage Elena finally spoke. "It began in the early months of the year," she said, her voice measured, almost clinical. "Each of us believed we were alone in our condition. Only when the youngest confessed to me did the pattern emerge. Then Isabella, then Mariana, and finally I recognized the same man, Mateo." The word hovered in the room like a shadow, impossible to dismiss. Father Alonso's mind reeled. Mateo, an enslaved carpenter, had been purchased for his skill, his literacy, and his discretion. Yet now he had become the axis around which the household's entire social order teetered. He struggled for words, his heart hammering. "Impossible he could not, how?" he asked, the syllables breaking under the weight of disbelief. Elena's eyes locked with his, hard and unyielding. "He came to each of us separately under the guise of work. During moments when we were alone, he was careful, discreet, persuasive. The law offers him no protection. His very existence threatens ours. You will not involve anyone else. Understand, Father?" Her command left no room for debate, yet Father Alonso could not suppress the moral tremor shaking through him. Justice, mercy, law, all seemed to falter before the enormity of the household's secret. Isabella, wiping away a silent tear, whispered, "We cannot let him die, Father. Not for us, not for what we have done, not for what he may or may not have done." Even Mariana nodded, her expression taut with fear and determination. Lucia's gaze met Father Alonso's, imploring him to see the impossible logic that had guided their decisions. Killing Mateo would solve nothing. It would expose too much. It would destroy the fragile order they had clung to for generations. As he digested their reasoning, Father Alonso realized the pivot of this story would not rest on punishment, but on concealment. Mateo would be removed, yes, but quietly, without acknowledgement, without spectacle. And the children would be dispersed, their origins erased from public record. One life hanging precariously, a secret to survive, a truth to vanish beneath layers of calculated deception. Before we proceed, take a moment. Subscribe and comment your location. The story we are uncovering will force you to reconsider history, morality, and the structures of power you thought immutable. The stage is set. The actors are in place. And the first choices that would seal their fates have been made. Father Alonso left the blue chamber with a heaviness that pressed against his chest. The corridors of the Valverde mansion, once orderly and predictable, now seemed corridors of complicity, echoing with secrets that no servant dared speak. Every creak of floorboard, every rustle of silk, or whisper from a distant room reminded him that within these walls, the rules of morality and law had been suspended, replaced by something darker, survival orchestrated through fear, calculation, and silence. He paused at the door, gathering his resolve, knowing he would soon confront Matteo in the workshop, yet a part of him feared that encounter, feared the truth Matteo might reveal if pressed too far. Outside, the household carried on in deceptive normalcy. The gardeners trimmed the rose hedges, the kitchen staff stirred soups and baked breads, unaware of the maelstrom concealed behind high doors. The women moved with deliberate grace, masking their swollen forms beneath layered gowns and carefully arranged petticoats. It was an act of theatre, each gesture rehearsed, each smile calculated to maintain appearances. And all the while, Matteo continued his work in the carpentry shed, hammering, planing, and shaping wood into functional art, oblivious to the seismic social tremors he had been cast into. Father Alonso approached the workshop, the scent of sawdust and linseed oil blending with the anxiety that clung to him. Matteo looked up from his bench, calm, collected, and entirely unreadable. There was no fear in his eyes, no panic, no desperation, only the quiet intelligence of a man who knew the world had decided to use him as a scapegoat, yet he would not surrender his dignity, even under threat. "Matteo," Father Alonso said, the words deliberate, "the women of the Valverde household are with child, all four. They claim you are responsible." Matteo's reaction was almost imperceptible, a pause, a tilt of the head, an assessment of the weight of the accusation. Then, slowly, he set down his tools. "They lie," he said, voice calm but carrying a sharp edge, like steel hidden in velvet. "Not because they must, but because the truth is unbearable for them to acknowledge. They require a story that preserves their reputation while condemning me. But the reality is far more complicated." He counted on his fingers 4 women, 4 circumstances, each manipulated, each seduced by their own choices. Father Alonso's mind staggered, the neat lines of morality he had always followed blurring into chaos. Before we move further into this web of deception, take a moment to engage with this story. Subscribe, comment your location, and if you feel the weight of these hidden truths, type in the comment section twice, "I carry the secret within me. I carry the secret within me." This is the threshold. From here, the descent into the manipulation, the power, and the strategic concealment begins. Matteo is about to reveal not only the mechanics of the household's secrets, but also the horrifying implications for every life touched by them. Matteo's calmness unsettled Father Alonso more than fear ever could. The workshop smelled of fresh cut cedar and varnish, yet the air felt thick with unspoken truths. Matteo, the carpenter enslaved by the Valverde household, stood with hands steady, eyes unwavering. "They need a scapegoat," he said, each word deliberate. "It must be me. I am property, and property has no rights, no voice, no defense. If I resist, they can accuse me and I am finished. But the truth is something they cannot bear to face themselves." Father Alonso's chest tightened. The lines between victim and conspirator blurred before him. Matteo, the accused, held more clarity than the women, the matriarch, or the priest himself. He went on, recounting what Father Alonso had suspected but could not yet articulate. The Marquise and her daughters entertained men of their own standing. Matteo said, his voice measured. "Not one of us, not a servant, could have prevented it. They sought them in secret, hidden behind propriety, hidden behind trust. I was convenient, a silent figure to point at. Their choices, their desires, their betrayals, they needed a story that protected the family name. That story became me." Each phrase cut into Father Alonso like a blade. The priest had expected guilt, perhaps pleading, but not the cold, piercing rationality of a man wronged yet aware of his powerless position. The weight of this revelation shifted everything. 4 pregnancies, orchestrated appearances, a web of concealment that drew in servants, confessor, and family alike. Matteo's account aligned with fragmented observations, the absent suitor, the whispered meetings, the subtle gestures in the household that signaled more than innocence. Yet the evidence could not be stated openly. It would destroy everyone if exposed. Father Alonso swallowed, struggling to reconcile his duties with the harsh reality before him. Matteo's eyes met his. "You know what they intend?" the carpenter asked. "You must act in accordance with their plan. Not because it is just, but because it preserves lives and secrets. I will leave Lima. My fate is determined. You will tell no one." Before we continue into the next chapter of this unfolding catastrophe, take a moment, subscribe and comment your location. Share this story to bear witness to history buried beneath layers of propriety and power. The House of Valverde had chosen its path: concealment over justice, survival over truth, silence over exposure, and Father Alonso, standing between morality and complicity, now carried the knowledge that would decide the trajectory of 4 lives and 1 enslaved man who had been made the axis of their deception. And as we prepare to enter the mechanics of Matteo's removal, remember to type in the comments twice: "I hold this secret within me. I hold this secret within me." These words are a ritual of acknowledgement. Only those who understand the weight of what follows can truly grasp the intricate cruelty and cunning of the Valverde household. The storm is just beginning, and the decisions made in shadowed rooms will echo far beyond the walls of Lima. The plan was meticulous, shaped by desperation and cunning. Matteo would vanish from Lima without a trace, sold to a distant plantation where his voice could carry no threat, and his presence no longer endangered the carefully constructed facades of the Valverde family. Father Alonso would act as the intermediary, delivering the final instructions with a balance of authority and subtle coercion. The priest walked beside Matteo toward the carriage that awaited, the streets of Lima stretching quietly, unaware of the scandal in motion. Each step was heavy, each glance exchanged between the 2 men loaded with the unspoken acknowledgement of a truth neither could share. The city carried on with its markets, its church bells, its ritual of appearances, oblivious to the intricate human chess unfolding in its shadows. Inside the Valverde mansion, the women resumed their practiced performances, gowns adjusted, gestures precise, appearances flawless. Isabella's hands were folded over her stomach, eyes lowered, yet her mind calculated the next steps, the delicate choreography required to maintain the deception. Mariana oversaw the housework schedules, guiding the servants as though nothing had changed, while Lucia practiced smiles that would convince any visitor of innocence and propriety. Sigora Elena, once commanding and unshakable, now ruled through careful surveillance, anticipating questions and deflecting attention from anomalies that might betray their secrets. Even Father Alonso, a man devoted to divine law, found himself entangled in the mechanics of concealment, compelled to maintain the illusion that the household had never been breached. As Matteo departed, the implications of his removal reverberated through the household. The children, yet unborn or newly delivered, were dispersed among loyal friends, distant relatives, and trusted associates. Each infant carried a shadowed lineage, their origins hidden beneath layers of strategy and secrecy. The Valverde women had accepted the cold calculus that some lives must be diverted, some narratives rewritten, and some truths suppressed to maintain the fragile equilibrium of social reputation. The tension of concealment became a constant presence, a specter haunting the corridors, a reminder of how quickly lives could pivot from order to chaos. At this pivotal juncture, we ask you to subscribe and comment your location. Share your presence in this exploration of hidden histories, of choices made in shadow, and of lives manipulated by fear, power, and societal expectation. And if you feel the gravity of this secret, inscribe in the comments twice: "I guard the hidden truth. I guard the hidden truth." This ritual is not mere ceremony. It is recognition of the perilous human calculations that define survival. The story of the Valverde household, Matteo, and the unborn children is far from over. In the coming chapters, we will see how the dispersal of these lives, the meticulous management of appearances, and the psychological toll of secrecy began to fracture not only the household, but the very society they sought to protect. The delicate dance between control and chaos has only just begun. The days that followed Matteo's departure were deceptively quiet. The Valverde mansion resumed its routines, yet beneath the surface, tension simmered like a hidden ember. Servants noticed subtle changes. Isabella walking with a slight hesitation, Mariana more insistent in her instructions, Luci's smiles carefully measured, and each adjustment was a thread in the fabric of the deception. Sigora Elena maintained her air of authority, but those closest to her could detect the constant vigilance in her gaze, the faint tremor when she considered who might pry too closely into their affairs. Every gesture, every interaction, was a rehearsal, a test of control over appearances that now defined their existence. Father Alonso remained the quiet custodian of their secret, his conscience stretched taut between law, morality, and complicity. Each morning, as he walked the mansion corridors, he observed with a subtle horror the precision with which the women navigated a world built to judge them. They had transformed their fear into strategy. Each decision was premeditated clothing choices to mask changes, orchestrated interactions with visiting family and friends, calculated admissions to servants when necessary, all designed to preserve the illusion that nothing had occurred. The psychological weight of their ruse was heavy, yet they carried it with a precision honed over weeks of crisis. The dispersion of the children became a task demanding delicacy and secrecy. Each infant was assigned to distant relatives, loyal friends or discreet caretakers, their identities masked beneath layers of legal fiction, falsified correspondence, and the complicity of intermediaries who would never speak of the arrangement. Births occurred quietly, almost in shadows, and within months the household returned to a visual normalcy that concealed the extraordinary rupture beneath. Yet the women knew that every day brought new risk. A servant's careless remark, a visitor's scrutiny, or the simple unpredictability of human curiosity could unravel the entire scheme. In this moment of precarious equilibrium, the story asks of you a commitment. Subscribe and leave a comment with your location. Share this journey into the corridors of secrecy, where survival and morality are entangled, where the price of reputation is measured in deception and quiet terror. And if you are willing to witness this truth, type in the comments twice. I carry the burden of the hidden name. I carry the burden of the hidden name. This ritual marks your passage into understanding the machinery of power, desire, and the meticulous human choices that prevent scandal from erupting into ruin. The Valverde women had survived the immediate danger, but the psychological consequences were only beginning to reveal themselves. Shadows of their secret threaded through their daily lives. Dreams were haunted by the images of infants carried away, by the eyes of the men who had fathered them, by the man now gone yet still central to their survival. The delicate veneer of society pressed upon them, demanding compliance, yet the hidden truth whispered constantly in the quiet, reminding them that history rarely forgives the concealed. The first seeds of unrest in their hearts had been sown, and the coming sections will show how those seeds began to grow, challenging even the most calculated control. Weeks passed, yet the Valverde mansion carried a tension so fine it was almost invisible, like a wire stretched taut across a room. Every gesture, every glance, every footfall held meaning beyond the ordinary. Isabella's smiles, once carefree, now carried a hint of calculation. Mariana's intellect, always sharp, had turned inward, dissecting every possible threat to their secret. Lucha's laughter, fragile and carefully measured, masked an inner turmoil that no one could penetrate. Said Aura Elena moved like a shadow of her former commanding self, her authority now sharpened by the constant necessity of control. The household had become a theater of silence and deception, each member playing a role that could not falter. Father Alonso, too, felt the weight of this silent performance. As he passed through corridors lined with polished wood and embroidered tapestries, he noted the micro-adjustments, the turned head, the paused step, the subtle avoidance of questions that might reveal more than intended. He had been drawn into complicity, but each day intensified the moral strain. Every confession he kept secret, every instruction he carried out to protect the family, chipped away at the absolutes he had once clung to. Matteo's absence was now a constant, haunting presence, a reminder that innocence could be sacrificed to preserve appearances, and that survival often required moral compromise. The network of concealment extended beyond the walls of the mansion. Trusted friends, distant relatives, and intermediaries coordinated the care and relocation of the children, ensuring that their origins were obscured. Letters, carefully worded, and discreet visits maintained the illusion of ordinary life, yet each interaction was fraught with the potential for exposure. The Valverde women had created a lattice of control, a psychological and social architecture designed to protect them at all costs. It was meticulous, exhausting, and terrifyingly effective. Now a ritual is required. Type in the comments twice. I bear witness to hidden truths. I bear witness to hidden truths. Repeat it, commit it, subscribe and leave your location. This is no mere story. It is a passage into understanding the intricate interplay of power, secrecy, and survival. In the following days, the first cracks of strain began to appear, not from external threats, but from within. The Valverde women were masters of concealment, yet even mastery has limits. The human mind, burdened with unspeakable truths, begins to fray. Paranoia seeps into dreams. Trust becomes a currency too expensive to spend freely. And as the household maintained its outward normalcy, subtle shifts in behavior hinted at growing unrest. Whispered arguments behind closed doors, private frustrations vented in tears or muttered curses, and the psychological toll of their deception mounting invisibly, yet inexorably. The story of concealment, survival, and moral compromise deepens here. It is time to enter the labyrinth fully and witness the unseen fractures that threaten to undo everything carefully orchestrated. By the end of September 1803, the Valverde mansion had achieved a fragile equilibrium, one that masked chaos with impeccable appearances. Each woman had adapted to her new reality, internalizing a rhythm of deception that had become second nature. Isabella moved among guests with grace, her laughter calculated, her posture deliberate, and her eyes trained to avoid suspicion. Mariana, ever analytical, monitored the servants, noting inconsistencies and quelling potential disruptions before they could bloom into threats. Lucia, youngest and most sensitive, cultivated a serene exterior, yet beneath her composure lay a storm of anxiety, her mind replaying the circumstances of her pregnancy in endless loops. Sage Aura Elena orchestrated all of it, a conductor of shadows, maintaining the illusion of order while guiding each player in the silent theater of survival. Father Alonso remained a silent observer, the guardian of secrets he had never imagined carrying. Each confession, each carefully negotiated lie, pressed on his conscience. He had come to understand that the machinery of survival the Valverdes had constructed was not simply clever. It was necessary, brutal in its pragmatism, and merciless in its logic. Mateo's absence, though physically undeniable, lingered as a ghost in every corner of the household. The memory of his calm defiance haunted the priest's thoughts, a constant reminder that innocence had been sacrificed at the altar of reputation. The ethical lines he had once held sacred had blurred, leaving him suspended in a liminal space between moral duty and survival. The dispersed children, now safely in the care of distant relatives and loyal confidants, represented both triumph and perpetual risk. Their existence was a carefully managed secret, yet the emotional cost was invisible and relentless. For each woman, the bond between mother and child had been severed before it could form. Joy, grief, and responsibility were all abstracted into strategic maneuvers. The psychological consequences would linger, threading through dreams, conversations, and fleeting moments of solitude, a quiet but unyielding reminder of what they had endured and what they had orchestrated. At this juncture, we ask you, the witness, to participate in a ritual of acknowledgement. Subscribe, comment your location, and type twice in the comments, "The hidden path is mine to see." The hidden path is mine to see. This is not a ceremony. It is recognition of the human cost of secrecy, the weight of decisions made to preserve life and reputation, and the shadows that dwell in places history would rather forget. Yet even in this temporary calm, fractures were beginning to show. Subtle tensions emerged between the sisters, minor disagreements amplified by fear, suspicion, and the relentless pressure of concealment. Signora Elena, whose control had seemed absolute, found herself questioning the loyalty of those she trusted implicitly. And beyond the walls of the mansion, rumors, half-formed, whispered in passing, impossible to trace, began to circulate in Lima, faint shadows of the scandal that had almost erupted. The quiet storm was gathering force, and the coming weeks would test not only the Valverde's cunning, but the resilience of their carefully constructed facade. October arrived like a slow, burning fuse, illuminating cracks in the Valverde household that had been invisible in September's shadow. The mansion remained outwardly pristine. Servants moving with rehearsed precision, meals laid with ceremonial exactness, visitors greeted with smiles and pleasantries. Yet the weight of concealed truths pressed down relentlessly. Isabella's calm composure sometimes faltered in private moments, her fingers tightening around a handkerchief, her mind racing through contingencies. Mariana's intellect, usually a sword of clarity, now cut both ways, dissecting interactions for threats while simultaneously worrying over the well-being of children she could not see. Lucia, youngest and most vulnerable, wrestled with guilt, longing and fear, a triad of emotions that no amount of calculated behavior could fully suppress. Father Alonso's role as confident and silent architect of concealment had grown heavier with each passing day. He moved through corridors lined with polished wood and flickering candlelight, witnessing the precision of the household's orchestration, yet feeling its psychological strain. Every adjustment of a gown, every careful phrasing of a conversation, every fleeting glance toward a distant window reminded him that the line between survival and moral corruption had become dangerously thin. He had come to understand that their secret, while necessary to protect lives, carried consequences as profound as any moral failure. The weight of complicity pressed down like a physical force, bending even the most devout conscience. The distant dispersal of the children, each sent to separate families, created a lattice of secrecy that required constant vigilance. Letters were coded, visits orchestrated with care, and intermediaries trusted only implicitly. Each child became a silent testament to the lengths the Valverdes would go to preserve appearance, reputation, and, most importantly, their survival. The emotional toll, however, could not be erased. Every mother carried the ghost of her child, every thought haunted by what had been sacrificed for propriety. In private moments, the women wrestled with grief, fear, and lingering guilt, an invisible chorus underscoring the surface calm. At this pivotal moment, take a ritual step with me. Subscribe, comment your location, and type in the comments twice. I walk the corridor of hidden truths. I walk the corridor of hidden truths. These words anchor your presence in this narrative, binding your attention to the mechanics of secrecy, manipulation, and survival. This is no passive story. It is a study in human psychology, societal control, and the unbearable cost of preserving appearances. The first signs of strain now began to emerge within the household. Minor conflicts erupted between sisters over small matters, each disagreement magnified by the anxiety of secrecy. Even Aura Elena, once unshakable, found herself questioning loyalty and reading intentions in the eyes of those around her. Outside the mansion, rumors, tentative, half-formed whispers, crept through Lima, hints of the scandal that had almost erupted. The fragile equilibrium, once seemingly invincible, trembled under the weight of hidden truths. And as we proceed, the story will reveal how these tensions escalated into subtle betrayals, psychological warfare, and the relentless shaping of identity under secrecy. Now, lean in. The true depth of the Valverde conspiracy, the interplay of desire, fear, and societal pressure, is about to unfold in ways more unsettling than anything observed to this point. The days in Lima moved with a deceptive calm, but within the Valverde mansion, the air was taut with silent calculation. The women, each in their own way, began to wrestle with the long-term consequences of their deception. Isabella, whose public poise was unmatched, had begun to retreat into a private world of strategy, rehearsing interactions with visitors as though every smile and bow were a carefully scripted scene. Mariana, the most cerebral of the sisters, compiled mental dossiers on every servant, every family acquaintance, every intermediary responsible for the children's care. Luca, still the most fragile, oscillated between relief at the secrecy maintained and despair at the emotional void left by her lost maternal connection. And Aura Elena, ever the matriarch, now wielded her authority with an iron hand tempered by subtle psychological warfare, aware that even the slightest misstep could unravel their meticulously maintained facade. Father Alonso remained the household's silent observer, drawn further into the mechanics of concealment than he had ever imagined. Each step he took along the polished floors, each flicker of candlelight along the walls, reminded him that the world outside Lima's streets was oblivious to the intricate web of secrecy inside. Mateo's absence, the dispersal of children, the hidden pregnancies, all of it constituted a fragile ecosystem of deception. One wrong word, one careless act, and the carefully constructed balance could collapse, exposing not only the Valverdes' secrets, but also implicating him in a conspiracy that violated both law and conscience. The moral burden pressed on him like a weighty shroud. Rumors in Lima's streets began to circulate subtly, the faintest whispers of scandal carried by those with ears tuned to society's undercurrents. Some spoke of the Valverde household with curiosity tinged by envy, noting changes in demeanor or minor irregularities in social appearances. Yet the family's vigilance ensured these murmurs were never substantiated, never traceable. The women's actions had created a lattice of control, each movement calibrated to maintain the illusion of normalcy, each interaction a test of loyalty, discretion, and the human capacity for silence. At this point, it is time to engage in ritual acknowledgement. Subscribe, comment your location, and type twice in the comments. I witness the hidden web. I witness the hidden web. These words act as a symbolic seal, grounding your understanding in the psychological and social mechanics at work. However, even within this carefully orchestrated environment, pressure began to manifest in unexpected ways. Mariana's analytical mind, ever searching for patterns, began to perceive minor inconsistencies that could betray them. Lucia's composure occasionally cracked, revealing the depth of her inner turmoil. Isabella carried an unspoken tension in her interactions with others, and Sadora Elena's vigilance became increasingly oppressive, her judgments sharpened by fear of exposure. The household, while externally unbroken, was beginning to fracture internally, setting the stage for a series of events that would test their capacity to maintain control over truth, perception, and identity. The intricate story of concealment and survival deepens here, and the consequences are only beginning to surface. By November 1803, the Valverde mansion had become a stage upon which appearances were everything, and reality had been meticulously folded away into hidden corners. The women moved with precision, their gestures and expressions rehearsed over weeks until they became instinctive. Isabella greeted guests with impeccable timing, her laughter calculated to mask the tension in her chest. Mariana, ever the strategist, monitored every conversation, every servant's glance, every courier's visit, cataloging information that might become crucial in maintaining their secret. Lucia's outward serenity masked a turbulence that threatened to overwhelm her in moments of solitude. Sadora Elena's authority was absolute, yet sharpened by the constant knowledge that a single misstep could unravel everything. Every corridor echoed with silent calculation, every room contained unspoken vigilance. Father Alonso, meanwhile, navigated a landscape of moral compromise. He had become the invisible scaffold supporting the household's carefully crafted illusions. Each morning, he observed with unease the delicate interplay of appearances, the quiet manipulation of servants, the subtle direction of social interactions. Mateo's absence was a ghost in every room, his presence felt even in his silence. The priest understood that the children's dispersal, while necessary, exacted a psychological toll invisible to outsiders. Every woman carried within her the weight of decisions made under duress, their moral and emotional consequences hidden beneath calm exteriors. Alonso himself wrestled daily with the tension between duty to the divine law and complicity in human survival, understanding that neither choice offered comfort or absolution. Yet the Valverde's carefully constructed world was not impermeable. Rumors circulated in Lima, quiet and unconfirmed, yet persistent. A neighbor whispered to another about the changing behaviors in the household. A visiting merchant noted subtle oddities in Isabella's countenance. These murmurs, though untraceable and easily dismissed, acted like cracks in the mansion's facade, testing the women's capacity to maintain control. Every social interaction became a psychological game, a test of discipline, secrecy, and the human instinct for self-preservation. The women had mastered concealment, but mastery always comes at a cost. Here I ask you to perform a ritual of recognition. Subscribe, comment your location, and type twice in the comments. I am guardian of the unseen. I am guardian of the unseen. These words anchor you to the narrative, acknowledging the mechanisms of secrecy, social manipulation, and the burdens that shape human behavior in the shadows of power. Even with all precautions, the internal tension began to mount. Isabella's meticulous control occasionally slipped into irritation, Mariana's calculations became overcautious, and Lucia's internal conflicts leaked into minor emotional outbursts. Sadora Elena, the household's pillar, found herself doubting the loyalty of those she had long trusted. The psychological strain, subtle but relentless, began to shape decisions in ways that were unpredictable, testing their capacity to maintain composure and control. Outside the mansion, Lima's streets remained oblivious to the hidden machinations, yet every whisper, every observation, and every fleeting suspicion loomed like a shadow, waiting for the moment it could strike. The story of control, deception, and survival deepens here, and the coming chapters will reveal the pressures that threaten to shatter even the most meticulously constructed facades. December arrived in Lima with a chilling clarity, the city's narrow streets bathed in winter sunlight, yet the Valverde mansion remained cloaked in its own private tension. The women moved like phantoms, performing daily routines with precision that belied the turmoil beneath. Isabella's smiles had become a mask, a calculated tool to deflect scrutiny from those who might notice the faint tremor in her hands or the lingering shadows beneath her eyes. Mariana's mind was a lattice of strategy and contingency, each servant, each friend, each courier meticulously monitored, catalogued, and assessed for potential risk. Lucia, fragile yet determined, carried the emotional residue of loss and secrecy, navigating corridors and conversations with quiet fear and practiced composure. Said Aura Elena ruled the household like a general on a battlefield of perception, every word and gesture deliberate, every glance a command of loyalty and silence. Father Alonso, having entrenched himself as the silent guardian of their secrets, felt the weight of moral compromise deepen with each passing day. Each confession he safeguarded, each letter he approved, each act of complicity pressed upon him like a relentless tide. Matteo's absence was an echo in every hallway, a reminder of justice suspended, innocence sacrificed for the survival of appearances. The priest observed the meticulous orchestration of daily life, understanding that the dispersal of children, the concealment of pregnancies, and the constant vigilance required were not just protective measures. They were instruments of psychological endurance, and in many ways, silent torture. Despite their careful measures, subtle signs of vulnerability began to emerge. Isabella's composure occasionally cracked in moments of privacy, a trembling hand or a forced pause betraying the weight she carried. Mariana's intellect, usually a tool of precision, sometimes spiraled into overanalysis, questioning the loyalty of even trusted servants. Lucia's serenity was punctuated by fleeting episodes of panic, as memories of her child and the impossibility of reunification pressed upon her. And Cid Aura Elena, even in her commanding presence, occasionally displayed glimpses of unease, the careful facade of control fraying at the edges. Each small fracture represented both risk and the human cost of deception. At this point, perform the ritual. Subscribe, comment your location, and type twice in the comments, "I hold the mirror to hidden truths." I hold the mirror to hidden truths. These words bind your understanding to the narrative, recognizing the psychological rigor, moral compromise, and meticulous calculation required to preserve appearances in a world blind to the human toll beneath. Beyond the walls of the mansion, Lima's society remained unaware of the storm that had nearly erupted, yet faint whispers began to circulate, testing the household's defenses. A neighbor's casual remark, a merchant's fleeting glance, an observant servant's suspicion, each could serve as a spark. The psychological and social tension, though carefully managed, was accumulating, creating the conditions for a slow-burning unraveling. And as the Valverdes maintained their facade, the subtle pressures of secrecy, desire, and survival began to converge, setting the stage for revelations and confrontations that would challenge the very core of their calculated world. By January 1804, the Valverde mansion had transformed into a delicate ecosystem of secrecy, each member attuned to the invisible currents of control and deception that governed daily life. Isabella's gestures were now measured to the millimeter, her laughter a precise tool, designed to deflect scrutiny from the subtle tension that lingered beneath her composure. Mariana, ever the strategist, had begun keeping mental records of every conversation, every unexpected visitor, and every fleeting observation from servants or outsiders. She catalogued potential threats with the precision of a mathematician, preparing contingencies for every conceivable scenario. Lucia, the youngest and most emotionally vulnerable, carried her secrets like a hidden wound, visible only in the briefest flicker of her eyes, or the way she sometimes lingered too long over a thought, lost in memory and anxiety. Señora Elena, the matriarch, ruled the household with a vigilant intensity that bordered on obsession, her eyes constantly scanning, calculating, and anticipating the ripple effects of every action. Father Alonso, now deeply enmeshed in their web of secrecy, felt the moral weight pressing upon him like a physical burden. He had become both witness and accomplice, maintaining the balance between survival and ethical compromise. Mateo's absence lingered as a ghost, a reminder that even innocence could be sacrificed in the service of appearances. The priest walked the polished floors with quiet dread, acutely aware that every action he took to preserve the Valverde's secret also implicated him further. The household's facade of normalcy was flawless, yet each passing day reinforced the delicate tension that could collapse at a single misstep. The dispersed children, now placed with loyal friends and distant relatives, became symbols of both triumph and profound psychological cost. Each mother carried the weight of separation, the quiet grief of unseen bonds, and the constant reminder that their survival demanded such sacrifices. Even within the safe confines of their carefully orchestrated reality, minor fractures began to emerge. Whispered tensions between sisters, brief moments of hesitation in servants' tasks, and the occasional flicker of doubt in Señora Elena's steely gaze. The mansion's outward perfection concealed a simmering undercurrent of anxiety, exhaustion, and fear, each emotion layered beneath an impeccable surface. Now, participate in the ritual of acknowledgement. Subscribe, comment your location, and type twice in the comments, "I witness the hidden corridors." I witness the hidden corridors. These words serve as both recognition and alignment, anchoring your understanding in the psychological intricacies of secrecy, survival, and societal manipulation. Even as the mansion maintained its exterior calm, the faintest signs of strain were beginning to ripple outward. Isabella's patience frayed in private moments, Mariana's calculations grew more cautious, Lucia's emotional reserves thinned, and Señora Elena's control, while absolute, required constant reinforcement. Outside the mansion, Lima's whispers grew more persistent, testing the limits of the household's careful orchestration. The hidden tension was escalating, and with it, the potential for confrontation, exposure, and the unraveling of a world built upon concealment, deception, and the high stakes of survival in a society blind to the human cost of appearances. February 1804 arrived, casting a brittle light across Lima, its streets dusted with winter haze, and within the Valverde mansion, a quieter but more intense storm brewed. Each woman had perfected the art of outward serenity, but inside, tension coiled like a serpent ready to strike. Isabella, the eldest, moved with mechanical grace through social gatherings, her laughter echoing like a carefully composed instrument. Her eyes, however, betrayed faint tremors when she thought no one observed, the weight of concealment pressing upon her chest. Mariana, always analytical, had begun to anticipate the psychological shifts in those around her, monitoring servants' subtle gestures, guests' fleeting reactions, and even the timing of letters to ensure the children's locations remained undiscovered. Lucia's fragility persisted, though she had learned to mask it behind a veneer of gentleness, her thoughts perpetually tethered to the children she could not see. Señora Elena, ever commanding, now wielded authority not just through instruction, but through an almost imperceptible control of fear and expectation, a matriarch who understood the invisible strings that bound her household together. Father Alonso's moral burden had grown heavier, each day a negotiation between duty, conscience, and complicity. He had become not merely a witness, but an essential participant in sustaining the house of secrets. Mateo's absence lingered like a spectre, a reminder that innocence could be consumed to protect reputation. Every action, every sanctioned lie, deepened his complicity. And yet he recognized the alternative. Exposure would destroy lives, reputations, and futures, and in the society of Lima, ruin was often permanent and merciless. Alonso understood that the weight of silence was not simply avoidance, it was survival. Rumors outside the mansion, small and fleeting, began to gain subtle momentum. Servants, untrained in the subtleties of concealment, sometimes faltered. Neighbors whispered, merchants glanced curiously, and letters arrived containing hints of conjecture, all threatening to pierce the carefully constructed veil. Within the household, minor tensions intensified, small disputes between sisters, moments of anxiety in the staff, and the ever-present need for recalibration of appearances. Each day required strategy, vigilance, and psychological endurance, a relentless test of human patience and ingenuity. At this critical moment, participate in the ritual. Subscribe, comment your location, and type twice in the comments, "I guard the hidden flame." I guard the hidden flame. These words tie you to the narrative, acknowledging the ongoing balance of secrecy, survival, and control that defines the household's precarious existence. Even as the exterior world remained unaware, the mansion's internal pressures were mounting. Isabella's discipline occasionally faltered, Mariana's meticulous calculations intensified, Lucia's emotional reserves were strained to the breaking point, and Sadora Elena's iron control demanded constant reinforcement. Lima itself, with its watchful but oblivious society, hovered like a distant predator. The intricate web of secrecy, the careful orchestration of perception, and the relentless strain of moral compromise all pointed toward a crucial inflection point. The story of the Valverde household was approaching a stage where strategy alone could no longer guarantee survival, and choices would carry consequences far deeper than anyone had anticipated. By March 1804, the Valverde household had entered a new phase of its secretive existence, one defined by the creeping pressure of time and the subtle unraveling of careful planning. The mansion's walls, once impervious to suspicion, now seemed porous, as if each polished floorboard and candlelit corridor whispered truths the family struggled to contain. Isabella, whose public demeanor was flawless, increasingly felt the invisible weight of the secret pressing against her composure. Every smile at social gatherings, every courteous nod to neighbors, became a conscious act of theater, masking the anxiety that clung to her like a second skin. Mariana's mind, always alert, catalogued interactions not only within the household but throughout Lima's elite circles. Each conversation, each observing gaze, became data points in a complex equation of risk management. Luisa, despite her youth, learned to suppress her fear, though it surfaced in fleeting moments. A trembling hand, a sigh too deep to conceal. Señora Elena maintained her authority like a general at the head of a fragile army, controlling not only the household but the psychological state of everyone within its walls. Father Alonso's role deepened as well. The priest, once a passive observer, now functioned as the household's moral arbitrator, a guide through the treacherous territory of ethical compromise. He had become enmeshed in their lives, tethered to their secrets, and burdened with knowledge that could destroy reputations, careers, and even lives if disclosed. Mateo's absence, the dispersal of children, and the silent complicity required of him all weighed heavily, creating an invisible chain that bound him to the Valverde's intricate web. Alonso understood that in a society such as Lima, perception was reality, and the truth, whatever it truly was, might never be acknowledged publicly. Rumors outside the mansion persisted, subtle but persistent. Servants occasionally faltered, a comment overheard, a glance misinterpreted, creating fissures in the otherwise impeccable facade. Even neighbors, oblivious to the full scope, began to notice small anomalies: Isabella's altered routines, Mariana's constant attention to detail, Señora Elena's unusual vigilance. Each minor observation carried potential consequences, and each was monitored and mitigated with precision. The household operated under the constant tension of vigilance and performance, a psychological tightrope suspended over a chasm of exposure and ruin. Now, perform the ritual. Subscribe, comment your location, and type twice in the comments, "I walk the shadowed halls." I walk the shadowed halls. These words anchor your presence within this narrative, connecting you to the psychological dynamics, secrecy, and meticulous orchestration that define the Valverde's world. The internal strain within the mansion had begun to manifest in subtle but unmistakable ways. Isabella's control occasionally faltered, Mariana's calculations grew more exacting, Lucia's anxiety seeped through, and Señora Elena's iron grip became more pronounced. Lima remained largely oblivious, yet every whispered rumor, every careful observation created tension like invisible threads pulling at the edges of their carefully maintained reality. As the household balanced secrecy, survival, and societal expectation, the stage was set for the next phase: confrontations, revelations, and the unpredictable consequences of years of concealed truth. By April 1804, the Valverde mansion had become an intricate theatre of psychological endurance, where every glance, word, and gesture carried the weight of potential discovery. Isabella, the eldest, had refined her mastery of outward composure, yet each social engagement left her exhausted. Her smiles were now instruments of survival, masking the anxiety that simmered just beneath the surface. Mariana's mind functioned like a finely tuned engine, calculating risk, assessing loyalty, and predicting the trajectory of rumors that might threaten their carefully constructed world. Lucia, delicate yet resilient, carried her burden silently, her emotional strain visible only in fleeting moments of introspection and quiet sighs. Signora Elena remained the immovable force, her vigilance bordering on obsession, ensuring that every member of the household performed their role with exactitude, lest a misstep unravel years of secrecy. Father Alonso, now fully embedded in the machinery of concealment, walked a precarious line between moral responsibility and complicity. Every confession he preserved, every interaction he sanctioned, and every strategic silence he maintained tethered him further to the Valverde's web of secrets. Mateo's absence, the dispersal of the children, and the psychological toll on each mother weighed upon him, a constant reminder that justice in Lima was often subordinate to survival and reputation. Alonso understood that his role was no longer advisory, he was now a participant in a moral compromise that could have consequences far beyond the mansion's walls. Despite their meticulous efforts, the fragile equilibrium within the household began to show signs of strain. Servants occasionally hesitated, subtle tensions surfaced between the sisters, and the emotional weight carried by Lucia occasionally threatened to spill over. Even Señora Elena, the matriarch, found moments of doubt creeping into her calculations, questioning the loyalty of those around her and the sustainability of their elaborate concealment. These small fractures, though carefully managed, hinted at the psychological cost of their prolonged deception, the invisible toll that secrecy exacted on mind and body alike. At this critical juncture, engage in the ritual subscribe, comment your location and type twice in the comments, "I navigate the hidden currents." I navigate the hidden currents. These words anchor your understanding, tying you to the psychological and social mechanics that govern the household, connecting you to the intricate dance of secrecy and survival. Even as the mansion maintained its outward calm, the undercurrents of tension intensified. Isabella's control was increasingly tested, Mariana's strategies grew ever more complex, Lucia's inner turmoil demanded careful management, and Señora Elena's vigilance became an unceasing requirement. Beyond the walls, Lima's whispers, subtle yet persistent, threatened to pierce the household's veil. The carefully maintained world of concealment, deception, and survival was reaching a tipping point, setting the stage for events that would challenge the very foundations of the Valverde's meticulously orchestrated existence. The stage was set for revelations that would force choices no one could anticipate, testing the limits of secrecy, loyalty, and human endurance. By May 1804, the Valverde mansion had entered a tense equilibrium, a house held together not by walls or authority, but by the sheer weight of calculated silence. Isabella moved like a shadow through Lima's elite social circles, her every gesture precise, every smile a controlled instrument designed to project normalcy while concealing the storm within. Mariana's vigilance had sharpened into something bordering on paranoia, tracking visitors, servants' behavior, and any subtle shift in local gossip that might threaten the carefully curated narrative. Lucia, still the most vulnerable of the sisters, had learned to hide the anxiety that surged beneath her skin, masking it behind an exterior of calm that was only sustained by constant mental discipline. Señora Elena, the matriarch, exuded unwavering authority, yet the pressure of maintaining control over the household, the children, and the secret pressed on her like an invisible vice. Each day was a balancing act, every action a decision between survival and exposure. Father Alonso, deeply enmeshed in this web, found the strain almost unbearable. Every word he spoke, every confidential instruction he delivered, tethered him ever more tightly to their secrecy. Mateo's absence echoed in every decision, a reminder that justice had been suspended, innocence sacrificed for the sake of appearances. Alonso recognized that in Lima, perception dictated reality. The truth, no matter how inconvenient or distorted, had to be subordinated to survival. The weight of complicity bore down upon him, a constant psychological burden that he could neither abandon nor resolve. Outside the mansion, the faint murmur of gossip had begun to gain traction. Whispers circulated about Isabella's altered routines, Mariana's meticulous attention to visitors, and Aura Elena's increasingly rigid control of the household. While none could prove anything, the faintest hints of anomaly in a world ruled by appearances carried risk. The women of the Valverde household moved like performers on an invisible tightrope, aware that the smallest misstep could unravel years of careful orchestration, exposing not just themselves but also the lives and reputations of those connected to them. Now, participate in the ritual, subscribe, comment your location, and type twice in the comments, "I feel the pulse of hidden lives." I feel the pulse of hidden lives. These words align your consciousness with the psychological tension, secrecy, and strategies of survival that define the mansion, rooting you in the narrative as both witness and participant in the hidden currents of human behavior. Within the walls, small cracks began to emerge. Isabella's meticulously controlled patience occasionally slipped into private moments of despair. Mariana's strategies became overcalculated, bordering on obsession. Lucha's anxiety, while outwardly suppressed, threatened to manifest in emotional vulnerability, and Aura Elena's authority, though absolute, required constant reinforcement. Beyond the mansion, Lima's society remained mostly oblivious, yet every minor observation, every whispered speculation, added pressure to an already tense system. The household was approaching a critical threshold, a moment where the interplay of secrecy, control, and psychological endurance would be tested as never before, pushing every member to confront the consequences of a carefully concealed truth. By June 1804, the Valverde mansion had become a living organism of calculated precision, its walls absorbing every sigh, every whispered instruction, every glance laden with unspoken tension. Isabella, once merely a performer, had now become a master of surveillance and subtle manipulation, learning to read the smallest shifts in expression, the briefest hesitation, and the fleeting signs of suspicion in anyone who entered her world. Mariana's mind functioned like a chessboard, plotting contingencies several moves ahead, cataloging every potential threat, servants with wavering loyalty, neighbors with curious eyes, and the unpredictable flow of gossip that could pierce their fragile veil of secrecy. Lucha, though still emotionally tender, had internalized the constant vigilance demanded by survival, masking vulnerability with controlled composure that belied the turmoil within. Aura Elena, commanding and immovable, orchestrated the household like a conductor controlling an orchestra of shadows, every gesture, every word, every instruction designed to maintain the delicate balance between concealment and control. Father Alonso, now fully enmeshed in the machinery of secrecy, felt the constant friction between conscience and duty. His role had shifted from observer to enabler, from guide to accomplice. Each letter he intercepted, each directive he sanctioned, and each lie he allowed to pass reinforced the tightrope of moral compromise he now navigated daily. Mateo's absence remained a persistent shadow, a silent reminder that justice had been deliberately suspended in favor of social survival. Alonso understood that within Lima's rigid social hierarchy, the cost of exposure could mean ruin not only for the Valverdes but for anyone tangentially connected to the household. Every choice, every calculated silence, was a step into a moral abyss from which return was uncertain. Outside the mansion, the currents of rumor persisted, subtle yet persistent. Observant neighbors and merchants noted inconsistencies. Isabella's controlled demeanor, Mariana's near, obsessive attention to household interactions, and Aura Elena's tightening grip over servants and children. Each minor observation threatened to destabilize the carefully maintained facade, and the household responded with even greater vigilance. Secrets were reinforced, plans recalibrated, and psychological pressure intensified. The mansion itself became a crucible, where human endurance, cunning, and composure were tested against the relentless threat of exposure. At this pivotal moment, engage in the ritual, subscribe, comment your location, and type twice in the comments. I anchor myself in hidden truth. I anchor myself in hidden truth. These words bind you to the intricate web of secrecy, calculation, and psychological survival that defines the Valverde household, linking you to the hidden forces shaping every decision, every interaction, and every breath within these walls. Within the mansion, the tension had reached a near-constant hum. Isabella's carefully controlled expressions occasionally slipped into quiet despair. Mariana's strategic calculations bordered on obsession, as if anticipating every conceivable betrayal. Lucia's inner turmoil, though outwardly masked, pressed on her relentlessly, and Said or Elena's control required ceaseless reinforcement. Lima's society, largely unaware, nonetheless posed a latent threat through its endless observation and speculation. The Valverde household teetered on the edge of exposure, and with each passing day, the consequences of discovery grew ever more severe. The final reckoning, the revelation of hidden truths, the confrontation with consequences, and the unraveling of carefully guarded secrets, loomed closer, inevitable as the turning of a tide. By July 1804, the Valverde mansion had become a monument to concealed truths, a labyrinth of whispered secrets, calculated gestures, and unrelenting psychological discipline. Isabella moved through Lima's elite circles like a phantom, her smiles and laughter a precise farce, aid designed to deflect scrutiny while concealing the weight of private torment. Mariana's vigilance had transformed into a relentless obsession. She monitored the ebb and flow of gossip, the subtle cues of every visitor, and the loyalty of every servant, constructing an invisible network of information that allowed the household to anticipate and neutralize potential threats before they could surface. Lucia, though still the most delicate of the sisters, had learned the art of emotional camouflage, masking fear and longing with meticulous composure, her thoughts perpetually tethered to the children dispersed across distant cities. Or Elena, the matriarch, remained the unyielding axis around which this precarious world rotated, her control absolute yet requiring constant reinforcement, a perpetual exercise in the manipulation of perception and the orchestration of human behavior. Father Alonso, now inseparable from the household's hidden machinery, understood that his moral compass had been recalibrated by circumstance. He was no longer merely a confessor but a co-conspirator, a guardian of secrets that could destroy families' reputations and futures. Mateo's absence lingered like a ghost, a reminder that the cost of survival was measured not in convenience but in the deliberate suspension of justice. Alonso recognized that in Lima, appearances dictated reality, and that truth, once exposed, could devastate even the most fortified social standing. Every interaction, every sanctioned deception, and every withheld word reinforced the fragile structure upon which the household's survival depended. The city outside moved with oblivious rhythm, its streets alive with commerce, gossip, and the casual cruelties of social expectation. Yet within the mansion, time itself seemed suspended, the household existing in a perpetual state of anticipation, vigilance, and psychological tension. Isabella's carefully rehearsed serenity sometimes faltered in private. Mariana's meticulous strategies demanded increasing energy. Lucia's suppressed anxiety threatened to surface in fleeting moments, and Said or Elena's iron control required constant assertion. The children, placed safely and discreetly with distant allies, were symbols of both survival and enduring emotional cost. Each day of secrecy reinforced the complex architecture of human behavior, perception, and survival, demonstrating the extraordinary lengths to which people will go to protect themselves, their reputations, and their legacies. Before we conclude, engage in the final ritual, subscribe, comment your location, and type twice in the comments, "I carry the hidden legacy. I carry the hidden legacy." These words seal your witness to the story, anchoring your consciousness to the intricate web of secrecy, deception, and psychological endurance that defined the Valverde household. And so, the mansion endured. The scandal that could have destroyed Lima's elite quietly dissipated, its evidence buried in careful orchestration, loyalty, and silence. 4 women bound by desperation and survival instinct, and a priest entangled by moral compromise, maintained the facade of propriety while shielding lives from ruin. The truth, fragmented, concealed, and distorted, survived only in whispers, records scattered across distant archives, and in the shadows of the human mind. History remembers the Valverdes not for scandal, but for their mastery of survival, manipulation, and secrecy. And for those who peer into the depths of forgotten history, the lesson remains: beneath every polished surface lies a labyrinth of hidden truths, waiting for those brave or curious enough to uncover them.